Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 10 of internal and external communication. We're looking at planning, preparation, promotion, and evaluation of events today. But before we get going, I just wanted to sincerely apologise to you for the delay in the week 9 lecture. There was some kind of problem with my internet at home, which meant that although the lecture was recorded, I just couldn't get it to upload to YouTube. So that won't happen again. I'll reorder how I'm doing things a little bit so that I can always upload it at work and you'll get it on time. But again, I really wanted to apologise. It was very frustrating and I hope it didn't set you back. So let's look at the topic for this week. It's a really good topic and hopefully events is something that you can actually find work in. I know from dealing with students and helping them find work and internships in these fields for a number of years, that event planning and management and working within the event sector is something that jobs often come up. And in fact, there's a really great job actually advertised at the moment with the Melbourne Writers' Festival. I know the team there and it would be a wonderful role. In fact, the person who's vacating the role, and the reason there's actually a vacancy there in that team, was a former student of mine. So it would be wonderful to see one of you guys apply for it and be successful. It's just an interesting avenue to explore if you are looking for work. That's the Melbourne Writers' Festival. So let's have a look at the preparation required for running an event. There's a number of different characteristics that you need to be aware of in terms of creating a successful event. You need to have the full commitment by the organisers, and this is really important because, as you probably know from your own experience, running events is very time consuming, can be very expensive, and so it's really something that needs to be totally dedicated to. You need to know that this is something that you really want to do and you want to do it well. So it needs that commitment in order to succeed. Likewise, you need clear objectives and priorities. What are you trying to achieve? What kind of event is this? And how are you going to prioritize the aspects of your event so you know in part where to put the money that you've got to spend? You need to identify your target public, and that will be really important both in terms of how you're going to facilitate the event, where it will be held, what kinds of facilities you'll include, what the content of the event will be, and also in terms of perhaps the budget for the event and the promotion. Certainly, you need to know who this event is aimed for in order to be able to promote it. You need to have a really efficient event committee and a good decision-making process. So that committee might be just you and one other person. For example, if it's a wedding and you're organising it yourself and making most of the stuff for the wedding yourself. If it's a wedding, it might have a larger team. You might have an event planner in addition to yourselves, caterer, florist, etc. But if it's a commercial event, you might have quite a large team. You might be the head event planner and you might be working with a number of different people, marketing people, all kinds of hospitality workers, staff, etc. You need to have a strong theme and an image, and this will be really important in order to create a cohesive brand that you can push out across social media, in print, and on basically all the information that pertains to the event. So most events will have some kind of logo or banner, and you should think about creating one too. Of course, you need really good planning and time to do it, time to pull this event off. It can take a lot longer to plan a big event than you might expect. Just the workload of locking in all of the dates, the venue, all of the vendors and so on can take a long time. Even a very small event, I was charged with putting on the end of year sort of like a student reading event in my previous role, and that just involved inviting guest speakers and also organising students to give readings of their work, and that would take several weeks just to organise something of that small magnitude. So a large event like, say, the Big Day Out or Melbourne Cup is going to take many months, if not years, to organise. You of course need to have control of your actions, budgets and deadlines. So you need to put in place a kind of timeline of events, how you're going to roll out and structure the planning of the event, let alone the event itself, and then also a clear understanding of how much you have to spend and are spending. Sponsorship might be something that you need to necessarily entertain, and we define that as a business relationship between a provider of funds, resources, or services and an event which offers some rights and associations that may be used for commercial advantage in return for sponsorship investment. And what that means is that you as the event organizer or manager will reach out to particular businesses for money or funds or facilities or equipment that you're hoping that they'll donate to your event. But in return, they get something as well. They get promotion of their products at the event, and that might take the place, place in terms of large banners. So things like the MCG or the Melbourne Show, etc. You'll often see big billboards and advertising for particular companies, and they'll be the sponsors of that event. But it might also take place in terms of particular products being used at the event. So maybe if Campari are sponsoring or Corona are sponsoring a particular music event, for example, only drinks by those companies will be served. So they're donating perhaps the drinks themselves, or they're donating money to the event, and in return you're really going to push their product, and so it's beneficial to them as well. When events are successful, it brings a lot of brand awareness and even sales for the sponsor, so it can be very lucrative for them. But you're going to have to articulate to the companies that you seek out sponsorship from exactly what they're going to gain by partnering with your event. So you need to think about what is the kind of event that you're running, and who are you best to target? Who stands to gain the most by being involved with you? If it's a music festival, then probably alcohol companies, maybe music equipment companies, perhaps even some clothing companies would, be aligned. Their target publics would be aligned with yours, and so there's a good match there. You need to remember that large companies are approached often for sponsorship, so they've got to choose really wisely about who they partner with. And as such, you need to be really aware of what your objectives are and also what theirs are, and then try to find a match so that you can sell the idea of sponsorship to them really pervasively. You need to set up an event team at the beginning stages of planning, and it's really important that everyone on the team shares a single vision and a philosophy of the event, so you all know what it is you're trying to do and you have a shared understanding of that, rather than 5 people on the team each trying to put on their own version of the event. You're all working together for a common goal. The team's got to recognise also that it's the face of the event. So you're going to be really integral to the event's success, but you're also going to be an active part of the promotion of that event just by being in the world. So if you're the event manager, everywhere you go, and as you're talking about the work that you're doing, about the event that you're running, you're part of that promotion. It's really important that you choose team members and management of the event who have experience, who are passionate and dedicated, because you don't want to have any stuff-ups in the planning or the rollout of an event. And those stuff-ups can be really problematic. If someone doesn't book the speakers or the content, musicians, etc., properly, if there's not the right equipment on the day, if the venue's double booked, any of those things can be really catastrophic. So we need to have really good people on the team. The staff at Disney are an example of this cohesive idea, even though there's some staff working at the level of hospitality and others dressed as characters and others running the rides, etc. they have a philosophy, one team looking after the space. So they're working together to create a single vision. In terms of putting on something like a beauty pageant, as an example, you need to do the following things. Confirm the event content, so the participants in the actual competition. You need to work out who owns the venue and get their permission to use it. Book venue with the owner, so you need to actually get something in writing, probably a contract, to say that you've hired the venue on a particular date. Work out the budget for the event. Develop the competitor instructions, so let them know where and when they need to arrive, what the requirements of the event are, if there are any rules, etc. Anything that they need to know. In literary festivals, which is the major events that I've been involved in, you normally get something called an artist information pack when you are confirmed, and that gives you very detailed instructions about where to come, at what time, where the green room is, what you need to bring, how you get paid, and so on. You might need to do a risks and safety assessment, so work out where the exits are. Do you need more fire extinguishers? Are there any risks to the competitors by being in the venue? Are there areas of the venue that need to be roped off? And so on. Work out how many staff you'll need on the day and then make those appointments so that you can run the event effectively. You'll need to secure the judging panel and also access for judges, somewhere for them to go when they're not on stage, and identify any signage requirements, which might be instructional and promotional. So you're going to have big billboards up advertising the pageant, and perhaps also some signs up letting people know where the entrances and exits are, where the toilets are, and so on. You'll need to have a media access plan, so how you're going to both roll out promotional information in terms of media releases and so on, and then also whether and how media can be involved on the day. What information are they privy to, and what areas are they privy to in the event itself? Really fundamental to have wet weather contingency plans. So especially if your event is held outside, what's going to happen if it's stormy on the day? Will you have to cancel the event, or do you have some other location that it can take place? In terms of the MC and the entertainment, what are you going to do about that? Are you going to hire someone to take that role? And what equipment will they need? Any other infrastructure requirements, marquees, stages, speakers, and so on, will need to be established. And then a site development plan will need to be created. So how are you going to allocate space? How are you going to keep everyone safe? Where are the different locations of the grounds? How is that all going to be mapped out? And for something as large as, say, the Big Day Out or even Moomba, other large festivals, Confest, etc., these kinds of plans are really fundamental to keeping people safe and making a great event. You'll also need to identify toilet and water requirements and other available facilities, because something like that, even if every other aspect of the event is fantastic, not having adequate toilets or running out of water can be catastrophic to the event. It can spell the failure of the event in the eyes of the participants and punters. It's really important to seek permission for the venues that you're hiring or using. In general, you really can't do anything outdoors or indoors without permission from the venue owner, and that includes public spaces. So Federation Square is owned by the Federation Square, probably by the city. It's an arm of the state government. The MCG is owned and managed by Melbourne Cricket Ground. Forum Theatre is privately owned. And it's important to know that each venue owner has their own processes and regulations for use of their space, and a lot of that will be listed online. So if you go onto the website for each venue that you're interested in, often they might have an application form for hire, or at least some terms and conditions around hiring. In most cases, there's also a cost to use the area or venue. And I've just got a little video here, which I'll open up, that talks about how this can go wrong when the right thing isn't done in order to secure an event venue. It's a good case study. Let's open it up and have a look.
Hello, I'm Abby Clausen, and this is 3-Minute Ad Age, your daily video news show. As outdoor promotional spectaculars go, it was huge. But of course that's the point if you're Carnival Cruise Lines and going for a Guinness record with the world's largest piñata. Carnival's new campaign tagline is "Fun for all for fun." And to animate that point, it worked with the Arnold Agency of Boston to create the stunt last Sunday. It happened in South Philadelphia near the city's sprawl of sports stadiums, and the whole thing looked like a backlot movie shoot of a Trojan horse scene. Except the horse was a multicolored mule, packed with an incredible 8,000 pounds of candy. The original idea was to lure thousands of spectators and use a wrecking ball to smash open the gigantic structure. Meanwhile, cameras would be rolling to capture it all for a new Carnival TV commercial. Carnival Senior Cruise Director John Held and production designer Brock Houghton.
This is like actually building a building, so have to have structural engineers involved. Really? We're limited by the structure we can build because it actually has to be able to support its own weight and be able to be picked up. So there's a lot of layers it goes through. There's some of the engineers, the steel. It's essentially made out of a big steel frame that's welded together in parts. Once it has the candy in it, it will weigh about 50,000 pounds, 25 tons.
25 tons.
And it took 3 weeks to build, and then there's actually a mechanism and a trap door that works like this. So when the wrecking ball hits it, the trap door will open and it will tear away and look exactly like paper mache.
But when the crowds showed up to watch the 6-story high piñata be burst open by a giant iron ball, they waited for hours. In the end, the Philadelphia Police Department stepped in and stopped the stunt for safety reasons. A spokesman said the police were concerned about how the large crowd might behave once 4 tons of candy was spewed across the open lot. Carnival is now exploring other plans for giving the sweets away. A week earlier, as part of the same promotional campaign, Carnival and Arnold unveiled another Guinness Record Challenge in downtown Dallas.
For instance, someone said, what if we make the world's largest beach ball and throw it off a building? Is that an idea? Is that something that'll stick? And surprisingly, it did. And I think, honestly, if you're looking at 2 guys who are at the absolute apex of their career, it's all downhill from here. We are never going to find a client cool enough to do something like this ever again.
We had the policemen who were working the detail, taking their cell phones out and taking pictures of it.
That's always a good sign when the police are not working. When the police are there with their cameras, that's usually a good sign.
And that's it for this 3-Minute Ad Age. Thanks for being with us. I'm Abby Clausen at Advertising Age in New York.
So you can see from that example that there's sort of nothing to be gained by not seeking the right permissions. That was a great stunt that they proposed with the Trojan horse full of candy, but because it wasn't sanctioned by the city or the police, it was deemed unsafe, it came to nothing. But I love the idea, the gumption of putting something that large in front of people. I also think the fears were probably would have borne out. The people would have gone crazy with the 4 tons of candy spilling out over the ground. So it's really important to really consider, the impacts, the safety and the risks of the event that you're proposing. For most events held in a public area, you'll need to gain a permit from an authority. The City of Melbourne issues permits for activities on their land. So that would include parks, the botanical gardens, all of those kinds of things. If roads are going to be closed, then local council, Vic Roads and police might need to give their approval. And of course that can be time consuming and complicated as well. A lot of other activities have their own permit requirements. So busking would be an example of that, or if you're going to have live music, you would need a permit. If you're going to sell food from vending vans or even independently from your own stalls, you'll need a license. There'll be a license required if you're going to sell liquor. and if you're going to set off fireworks, and just having any kind of gathering, even a wedding in a park, requires a permit. So at the risk of your events being shut down, you really do need to make sure that you have the right permissions. In terms of planning your site, you need to ensure that the layout of your event is carefully thought out. Your site plan is going to show your suppliers, so your food vendors, your other hospitality workers, your staff, etc., people setting up the toilets, and also the staff running the event and the public, so the people coming to the event, where your services, structures, entry and exit points are located. You need to consider that there might be some limitations in terms of the space during the setup and operation. So I'm thinking of the festival that occurs in Footscray in Melbourne along the river. There's a very narrow strip of land there. I think it's Laneway Festival that they use for the festival, and it's bordered on one side by water. So they would need to have a very careful site plan in order to keep people safe and to make sure that they had enough space for all the stages, the vendors, etc. You need to consider the movement of the crowd in and out of the space, so that there's a flow, so that people are coming in at one point and exiting at another point, that they can see and access the services. So is it clear where first aid are, where the hospitality area are, where they can get food and drinks, where toilets are, and so on. Also considering the front of house versus the back of house, so where the service staff are going to prepare the food and so on, where the musicians are sitting and standing before they're performing, and then what's happening in front of the punters. And also consider risk issues. Are there any risky areas like that river frontage, OH&S problems, areas where people, punters or staff, might be able to be hurt, and how are you going to deal with that? In terms of thinking about site planning for a music festival, just as a case study, you want to make sure that the crowd flow isn't going to double back on itself. So you're keeping people moving through the festival rather than jamming them all into a small space and then getting them pushing against each other to get to where they're trying to go. Trying to avoid, for the same reason, any cross flow. So you kind of want to situate things in a particular way so that the crowd's moving through the space rather than crossing through the space. You don't want any pinch points or bottlenecks or hazardous areas, places where people might get trapped, overcrowded and start to panic. And one way of achieving that is to give the crowd an obvious way to get where they want to go. So something like the Big Day Out's a good example. It's usually in a large space. There's clearly defined walkways and a number of venues where people can move from one to the next in an orderly fashion. You also need to consider that every area where you're going to invite people to be requires an exit point. And even if you're not using those exit points through the festival or through the event, they need to be there for an emergency. There's been lots of cases of people being trapped in buildings, say cinemas, when fires start and not being able to get to the exits. So panic occurs and people are crushed in the crowd, and we don't want that to happen. That would spell the end of the event moving forward. And for something like a music festival, you want to begin it and then have it flourish year after year, and that won't happen if there's a disaster like a fire or any other kind of emergency where people can't get out. Be aware that people will always take the shortest route possible to the most popular location. So they're not necessarily going to stay on the path that you designate if your path is meandering and long. They're not going to pay attention to the positioning of others. They're going to attempt to bypass systems in place to control crowd flows, thinking, this idea that it's only me, I'm the only one going under the barrier or over the fence. They will also push if in a confined location. They'll panic. So what you're trying to do is keep this basic human nature in mind when you set up your paths from one area of the venue to the next. Let's have a look at this, another case study about site planning and permits. Let's have a look. This is the Maitreya Festival. So that festival, this was from earlier this year actually. It was a festival in around Bendigo somewhere, I believe, and 8,000 people had bought tickets, but the event organisers hadn't secured the right permits. They had been asked to stop works on the festival site because there were concerns about Aboriginal heritage artefacts being damaged, and I think that's why they weren't given the permits, because there was worries about the location in terms of this Aboriginal heritage stuff, which is really important. So it's very concerning that they wanted to go ahead anyway. The organisers had failed to provide the council with a cultural heritage plan, and even when it was taken to VCAT, VCAT ruled in the favour of the council. So they didn't want the festival to go ahead. It wasn't culturally sensitive. But they just were going to take the festival to a new event venue down the road, an unsanctioned one, again without permits. And aside from the issue of the Indigenous culture, there were also grave concerns because this festival was being held in the height of summer, and there wasn't adequate services in terms of if a bushfire came through. Also, there were going to be no ambulances on site. So Victoria Police, the CFA and Ambulance Victoria were issuing statements at the time warning people that they would not be kept safe if they went to this festival. So that's another example of, they'd sort of put the cart before the horse. They'd advertised, they'd taken ticket sales, but they hadn't done their planning effectively. They hadn't secured the permits and really retained the rights with the right authorities in order to keep people safe and to run a sound event. It's an interesting case study. So it's interesting to consider the power of the internet on your event. It's very likely that participants will research the event prior to arrival, and in fact, everyone's online these days. It's probably how they found out about the festival to begin with. And it's interesting to note that even weddings, something small and personal like that, have their own websites these days occasionally. People will also use the internet to keep track of the event during the festival or event. So there'll be posts on Instagram, maybe Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook, etc. So you're just all the time wanting to put across a cohesive message. Ensure that your event's fantastic so that people are responding on social media positively. It's part of the promotion, if you like, ongoing promotion. Afterwards, the event will still be on the internet in terms of reviews, media write-ups, social media posts, and so on. So you're wanting to encourage people to respond positively in these forums. Sometimes the internet allows for interactive promotion. For example, the Interrobang Festival at the Wheeler Centre, which was again another really interesting festival where the Wheeler Centre requested that people ask questions about anything that they wanted, and then they collated the questions that got the most likes. You can actually have a look at this while we're talking. And they invited speakers to come and answer the questions. Let's have a look. So the Interrobang, a festival of questions. So they asked people to pose questions on the Interrobang website. Let's have a look what happened. So here's some examples that you could vote on. What are the ethical and environmental issues around lab-grown meat? For example, in the future, can I still be a vegetarian if I eat in vitro meat? And then you can see there, 5 people have liked that question. Which is more possible, time travel or time travel to alternative universes? 4 people have voted. We might be able to see the top-ranked questions here. Why don't more people have difficult conversations? 59 likes. How can we get Mano Island and Nauru detention closed down and the refugees treated humanely? 64 likes. Has loneliness in the 21st century Western world reached epidemic levels? 57 likes. So there's lots like that. It's a really interesting concept, and I would have a look at that if I were you. It's a great website and a really wonderful idea for an event. The interesting thing about it, though, is that I think it's widely understood to have been a failure. And that's because the Wheeler Centre is normally runs free events, but once they got everyone to contribute questions for the Interrobang Festival, they then charged for the events themselves in which they were going to respond to the questions. And that meant that they didn't sell enough tickets. So normally their events are booked out when they're free, but because they asked people to pay, they just didn't make as much money as expected. So on the days of the festival, there's a few key things you need to think about in order to ensure that the event delivery phase runs smoothly as possible. And these include that all your paperwork and plans need to be accurate, so you know what's got to occur on the day. You have a clear staffing structure in place and a sense of who's in charge. So perhaps a volunteer or a staff manager or both there on the day. You need to ensure that all staff have access to simple, clear event information. So a running sheet, for example, which we'll look at in a minute. Staff need to know what their roles and responsibilities are for the day, so there's no confusion around that. There needs to be verbal staff briefings and questions, maybe before the event starts, in the hour before the event starts, or even a day or two before. You would have a clear, detailed run sheet that explains who does what when, and whoever's in charge needs to be confident, make clear, simple decisions, and probably to be contactable throughout the event as well, because things will go wrong and staff will need to get in touch. The run sheet is the event for the event is the Bible for the event day. It's used to ensure that everything's progressing as planned. And it's a piece of paper, basically. It's like a schedule that includes all the key tasks for event delivery with individual deadlines and clear responsibilities. In order for the run sheet and the event to work, we need to make sure that we've got enough time for each part of the event. Make sure that no one's loaded up too much, that the responsibilities are shared equally between the staff. Make sure that staff and supplier instructions match the run sheet so that we're giving a cohesive message. Promotional details also need to match the run sheet, so we've told punters the right information, and build in contingency, so maybe leaving a little bit of extra time, having backup staff if someone gets sick, a contingency plan for wet weather, and so on. Here's an example. So run sheet for Metro Church in Brisbane. You can see the event details up the top here. It's for Sunday the 28th of March. It's for a particular kind of service. And then here's the timing. Production and service team arrive, musos arrive and set up, vocalists arrive and sound check. And you would see that with each of these times, you would have given particular instructions, so an artist's information pack to the musicians, explaining that they need to arrive at 7:15 and where to go. Same with the vocalists, 7:30 and where to go and what they need to bring, and so on. And then 9 o'clock start. You've got a list of the roles here, what everyone needs to do, announcements, song list and service order, so we know what the content is, and then any other instructions down the bottom. You'll be able to find more examples of run sheets online, so if you ever are putting on an event, I bet there's templates online as well. Instructions given to staff should be written and verbal. You need to give them a summary of their key responsibilities, let them know where they come and at what time, tell them who they're reporting to and give the contact details of that person and also who they're managing and likewise the contact details. And they may even want to get in touch with the people that they're managing and the people they're reporting to prior to the event and get to know them a little bit. They need to know what the event is about, so key background information, a copy of the run sheet. Let them know what equipment's required for their role and their responsibility, and give them a uniform if that's required or any other special information. In terms of the punters, the people who are coming to the event, these might be the participants, spectators, visitors, audience, whoever the event is for. The objective of the event manager is to make the event meaningful, magical and memorable, and we really want to ensure the longevity of the event unless it's a once-off. But if it's something we hope to run every year, then those things are really important. The punters will ultimately decide the fate of the event, if it's a success or a failure. So like that Interrobang example, not enough punters voted with their feet, and so it was deemed as a failure. The event manager needs to be mindful of the punters' needs. So these might be physicals in terms of providing toilets and warmth, food, make sure they can hear the event, places to sit and so on. Make sure they're secure and safe, and then to feel that the event was special, which is a little bit more amorphous. But those other things, the physical requirements and the safety and security, will lead into securing their emotional needs, to making sure that they feel that it was a good event. Once an event has passed, you're going to wrap it up and evaluate. You might have feel that your event had some unexpected twists and turns, and that's what life's about. That's to be expected. It won't go 100% perfectly, but a testimony to whether the event was successful was how you dealt with unexpected issues that cropped up. Make notes before, during and after. Keep tabs on what went well and what didn't go so well. These will refresh your memory when you write up your review of the event. It's interesting to note that the events industry is still pretty young. It's trying to establish legitimacy and credibility as an industry, and that means that we need to do really stringent reporting, accounting and critical reflection on our events to show that this is a serious industry that's got high standards, it's got a code of conduct, that's got some structure around it. Some of the things that you might want to measure in the wake of an event include whether you generated sales. Did you generate qualified sales leads? Did you help retain current customers? Did you enter a new market? Were you able to launch a new product or service? Could you build some awareness of a company or a product? Did you conduct market research and what did it say? Were you able to educate or motivate partners or employees? Influence and build relationships with the press, which is really valuable too. And in what ways did it support the local community? All of these impacts are things that you would want to evaluate post-event, and it may contribute to getting sponsorship and funding in further years. So it's really important that you keep track of all of this. When you're evaluating an event, you're looking at establishing the measurement of event outcomes. You want to create a demographic profile of the event audience. So did the people that you thought would come actually come? And if not, who were they? Who was this event attractive to? And then you'll know for the next time that you run it, who you're targeting, who your target publics are, and how you're going to therefore promote the event. You want to identify how the event can be improved and whether you can enhance its reputation in coming years, how you might promote it more successfully next time, and then also evaluate the event management processes. Did the staffing run well on the day? If the primary objective is to create sales and the secondary objective is to generate qualified sales leads, some of these specific metrics will be the number of transactions made, number of purchase orders received, the quantity of new accounts or customers, how much you spent versus how much you made, and the return on investment. These will be relevant to some events more than others. Depends on the kind of event, but certainly all events will be concerned with how much was spent versus how much was made. That's really important in terms of ensuring the longevity of the event. We don't want to be losing money. You might evaluate an event by conducting a survey or giving out feedback forms during or after the event. You might also want to ask people attending, via that feedback or via those surveys, whether they knew who the sponsors were. So was your positioning of the sponsorship effective? Did they know that they were being sponsored by Corona? Did they get a sense of that product by engaging with the event? And that's really valuable too, because then you can report back to your sponsors and say that the sponsorship worked. You helped them promote their products. After the event, you might want to hold a debrief meeting that includes as many people as possible who are involved. You could send out an evaluation sheet to the key stakeholders, especially those who couldn't attend the debrief, to give their feedback in person. And then evaluate the success of all you did against the objectives you set at the beginning of your event planning process. You'll summarise the attendance, so who attended, how many people, how did that stack up against your predictions. You'll develop the feedback forms and find a clever way of disseminating them, whether it's on the day or following up via email and so on. Record the comments and then provide in-depth feedback to your team. How are we going to improve things in the future? Questionnaires are sometimes called happy sheets, suggesting that the participants give too favourable an opinion, which is an interesting idea. And of course you want them to report back positively, but you also want an honest account. So you might ask your participants a range of questions, and these need to be carefully worded and considered so that you can really work on improving your event year to year. You might want to make the feedback form part of your gift voucher, so whether they get something in return for filling out the form. I know a lot of organisations often make feedback part of a competition cycle, so if you fill in the feedback, you enter the draw to win tickets to the next event or a particular product. Or you can make it so that they can only redeem the gift voucher when they've filled in the feedback and give it back to an attendant. So it might be something that they can use on the day. If they fill in the feedback form, they get a free drink or something like that. People are generally reluctant to fill in feedback forms regardless, so you need to have some kind of incentive there to ensure that you're reaching a wide target audience there. You're getting as much feedback as possible. Some of the questions that you might ask: did you enjoy the event? Why? Why not? What did you like most? What did you like least? What problems did you face? So they might identify that there were too few toilets, the crowds were too busy, it was too hot, there was no shade, etc. What could have been done to make the event better? How do you rate the various services provided? Hospitality, catering, transportation, management of staff, and then their behaviour and services. And then would you like to participate in the next event? And this is going to give you a good sense of sort of what you did well and what you could be improving on for the next time. After you've gathered people's perspectives on the event, you want to kind of collate all of this information into a report. And this is going to contain the aims and objectives of the event that you set out to put on. What was successful, what wasn't so successful about the event that you ran. Some sort of snippets or a collation of the people's responses. So we'll group these responses. Overall, people said this, or some people said this and others said that. You might collect the press clippings. So what did the media have to say about your event? Photos to show how the event looked on the day. Financial statements, so revenue versus expenditure. The program and other promotional publicity material, and then recommendations for the future. And a report like that is so valuable. It might help you gain sponsorship in the future or government funding. But aside from those things, it will also help you improve the event moving forward. So that's it for our lecture for this week. Before we finish, I'll just remind you that Assessment 2 is due next week. And I think I spoke about this last time, but we'll talk about it one more time. That you need to design a communication plan for an organisation of your choice. This could be a non-government organisation, a government department, a business or a corporation. And in designing the plan, you should refer to the readings and lectures. Then you need to create a 6 to 8 minute video to pitch your communication plan to the organisation. You're the voiceover or presenter on the video, and you can use video or you can just use audio. I don't mind either one. Then you need to create 2 PR writing samples, 100 words in total, to demonstrate a proposal idea to your client. It's not a test of your graphic design skills, so the video and so on, they don't have to be high tech. We're more interested in the content. So how you've understood the ideas, how you've understood what a communication plan is, and how to put it into practice. There is a case study provided for you on Moodle. So we had some questions about what are the writing samples, what kind of writing samples should you provide. So I've put a case study there to kind of help you. You can use the case study or you can find your own company and make one up for yourself. If you use the case study on Moodle, then it will give you a little bit of direction, and it also gives you a list of writing samples to choose from. So you might do a 2-page personality profile, a 2-page memo to the client proposing an unusual attention-getting book signing event tour, a pitch letter, a 2-page prompting sheet, or an op-ed article. And these are all relating to what I've called the superstar here, but is the subject of the case study that you can read. So that might make it a little bit easier if you use the case study, because it gives you a character to kind of work with and then a list of different documents you can create. But you don't have to feel beholden to that. You can also make up your own if you like. Feel free to send me an email if you need a hand. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing what you come up with. Thanks again. Bye.